Hello and welcome to Face to Face. Today we are going to be face to face with Mr. Frank Rotering. And we're going to be talking about something that I think is very important, and I hope you do too, and that is an alternative to capitalism and socialism. Frank has written a book which covers some of these issues, and that is what we're going to be discussing today, an alternative to capitalism and socialism. So Frank, why don't you introduce yourself and lead us off?
Okay, I'm 62 years old, live in Westminster, and I got into this train of thought, this project, about 22 years ago. Like many other people in the late 80s, I was becoming really concerned about climate change and environmental destruction generally. And I took my family to Mount Currie to support the Stein Valley, which was then in danger of being logged. And I heard David Suzuki, who was, as you know, quite a firebrand, still is today, and he really laid into standard economists and standard economic thinking because they were fixated on economic growth, on free trade, but they were ignoring the environment entirely. So I picked up on that. I thought about it, and I determined that, the man's right. The problem here, the ecological problem is rooted in our production, in our consumption, in other words, in economics. So I was in a computer career at that time, and I basically took a year off, and I took 3 semesters at SFU, Simon Fraser University in Vancouver, and I learned about standard economics, and I found out that David was in fact correct. It is a very monomaniacal, pro-growth, conventional discipline, and it's quite likely true that it is responsible, at least in some measure, for the ecological destruction we see. So I had another central experience at university, and that was with a professor named Steve Easton, my trade professor. Very nice guy, very conservative, Fraser Institute, but still, he engaged me in conversations after class. And during one such, discussion, I was sort of waving my arms, with my progressive views, and he turned to me and he said, "Frank, where's your model?" What he meant was, where's your theory? Where are your concepts? Where are your equations? And, what he meant was, if he wanted to prove that free trade was wonderful, he could go to the blackboard and pull out his mathematics and prove it. If I wanted to prove that free trade was destructive, I couldn't prove a thing. And this hit me like a thunderbolt. I thought about that, and I realized that we, on the left, progressive people, we have ethics, we have values, and we have a scattering of ideas, but we really don't have an economic theory to counter standard economic thought. And so this was about 1992 when I graduated, and since then I've been working on a new economic theory. It's now called The Economics of Needs and Limits, and again, it's this book here. So it's called The Economics of Needs and Limits, A New Economics for Sustainable Well-Being. And what it's intended to do is to act as what I call a guiding framework. In other words, if we don't like, as many on the left do not, if we don't like the results of capitalism's economic thinking and logic, then we really need something to replace that. Okay, we can't, again, just wave our arms. We have to know what should be done, what the results of an economic system should be. And that's what I'm trying to do with this book, okay? So that if one day, we should take over this economy, then we have a theory to work with. So the test is always, Jack, if you and I were, in charge of the Canadian economy, what would we do? What policies would we enact? What would we do about car production and wheat production, et cetera, et cetera? We need some mode of thought to help us along with that. And that's what this is supposed to be. Okay, so it's...
I know what I'd do. I'd reduce car production and maybe increase wheat production.
And I would probably agree with you, and the logic would probably agree with you as well. But again, unless we have that alternative theory, it's very hard to gain popular support, and it's very hard to remain consistent.
Now, I'm just going to interrupt here because
Sure.
I think that what I said was kind of at the heart of the argument, because when I say I would reduce car production, anybody who works in the entire industry that deals with cars says, I don't like that guy.
Right.
So at the same time, and we discussed this earlier, so I know this is in your book and your theory, the people who are in the car industry will not pay the price. Society will recreate good jobs in other areas, and we also mentioned, it's contractionary. What you're talking about is a contractionary revolution, which means the economy has to contract, but that doesn't mean that there are winners and losers. We will all simply work a little bit less, but maintain a standard of living. That's all very possible in a sensible economy.
Right.
What we have,
Right.
capitalism, is at the moment running in an insane way.
Yeah, we've always known that. Okay, people like you and me have been saying this for centuries, really, that we don't need to work as hard as we do. In 1899, Peter Kropotkin, who was a peasant revolutionary in Russia, said the same thing. Even at that time, they're talking about the 19th century here, that we already have the technology that we could all work, let's say, 20 or 30 hours a week at most. So this is true, but my project has been to place those sentiments and ideas and objectives into an actual economic theory. Okay, and then we have a basis for an actual social movement or a revolutionary movement. As you indicate, a contractionary revolution, as I call it, because what that would be then would be us, people who agree with this idea. The movement would be trying to impose this economic logic, okay, on the current system. And that would mean changing laws, of course, changing people's behavior, reducing the work week, as you say, all sorts of things. But it would be based on theory, okay? And we would be able to go to the public, either in an election or just in terms of, propaganda.
Or referendum.
Referendum, just trying to convince the masses. But we would have an actual theory rather than simply saying this is Jack Etkin's pet idea or Frank Rotering's pet idea. No, it's based on theory, and here it is.
Yes. So don't keep us in suspense. What is the theory, or an alternative maybe way of looking at it? Here we are. I'll just mention a few of the disasters we face. We had the Gulf of Mexico disaster last summer. We have the Japanese nuclear meltdown this summer.
Right.
We have climate change is an oncoming disaster, as the prairie is finding out now with record flooding. And we have our economies worldwide, especially in Europe, but it's coming here, and it's in the United States also. Governments massively in debt, while the corporations are rampant and have never had so much wealth. So that's where we are.
That's where we are, indeed.
And,
yes, right.
It's definitely time for a new theory.
It's definitely time for a new theory. And most important of all, the biosphere is on the verge of collapse, mostly through climate change and other ecological degradation. Okay, remember that we have to think in terms of theory, in terms of the core ideas, okay? That's how I'm attacking this. And two of the core ideas in economics are value and cost, okay? And under our current system and mode of standard economic thought, value is basically what you desire and can afford to pay for. And cost is what they call opportunity cost in the universities, which is basically, you choose to do A, you can't do B at the same time. You sacrifice B. B is the opportunity cost.
The word value then it means what we value, because that's what we choose to spend our money on.
It reflects our desires if we have the money to pay for the outputs.
Yes.
And to me, the problem starts right there. So we don't start at, the level of policy or what's wrong with corporations, but we start at the core. What is wrong with the capitalist conception of value and cost? So both of those are subjective. That is, they relate to our internal states. And that's a real problem because we really can't compare your internal state with somebody who's much poorer. Okay, and that's, by the way, how a standard economists rationalize inequality.
You mean people vote with their dollars?
Right.
So if you have lots of dollars, you have a lot more votes.
Exactly, you can vote. If you're poor, you have no dollars, no say. So that conception of value is, at its core, wrong for the kind of world we want to build. So where we begin with a new theory is redefining value according to our worldview, according to our ethics, and cost the same thing.
It's also interesting to me that in the capitalist world, you can't vote in certain ways because only certain things are on the market. I mean, I don't want the Gulf of Mexico disaster, but it almost as if we can't impact that. The oil companies are going to do what they want, and
exactly.
Away they go.
Right. The logic of capitalism is the interaction of corporate profits and manipulated consumer wants. That's the logic of the system.
With a controlled government in between.
With a controlled government, media, etc. in between. Exactly. But again, if you want to change this, at the very core, you have to start with those basic concepts. So, the theory actually rests on somebody from history. I did get two excellent ideas from my reading of economic history. And the person's name is John Ruskin, who is more generally known as an art critic and social critic. He lived in about 1870, 1880 when he was active. But he wrote some very interesting books on economics, again, from a very ethical perspective. And he came up with two concepts. One is called intrinsic value, which I've renamed potential value, and the other one is called effectual value. Now, I won't get into the details of that, Jack, because that takes us too far afield theoretically. But the point is that value in Ruskin's conception and mine is not subjective, how you feel, but objective. Your actual, palpable, demonstrable, measurable well-being. And I base it on health. I feel that the ultimate value from an economy is physical health. That this measures what is good about an economy. It places us, like you and me, and somebody in Somalia, a very poor person, or in Bangladesh, on the same plane. We both have the same kind of health measurements. And it allows us to make objective judgments about what is good in an economy, what we should and shouldn't produce. And then again, if you don't have enough dollars to vote, you really don't need it, because we can simply analyze objectively that product A would be good because it increases your health, and product B is not, because it has no effect or a detrimental effect on health. This sounds too narrow, but as I explain in the book, it's not. Many things are reflected in physical health, including emotional health and much else.
So, in other words, if the way you will measure the success of what we're doing is by saying, do we have a happy, healthy population and environment that is coming out of this?
Yes, not happiness. Happiness again is subjective.
Well, happiness is also linked to health.
It is. So it's superfluous. It can be measured through health. And again, but again, like desire, subjective desire, how do you know that people are happy? It's not a solid, measurable condition or attribute. And again, I'm trying to produce a theory that is defensible and that is in the long run, quantifiable.
Okay, I think happiness is defensible, but let's carry on. Okay, but I see what you mean. You've got a healthy population, healthy environment.
Right.
Then you can say you're going in,
and that
in
reflects,
the right
as you
directions.
yourself indicated, that reflects happiness. It reflects emotional
Yes.
stability. It reflects a lot of things. So I find physical health to be the core of my conception of value, again, objective value now, and also of cost. So if you or I were to dig a ditch or build a bridge or bake bread, we would get injured, we would get fatigued, there'd be wear and tear in our bodies. Again, there's a direct effect on health there. And I base my cost concept, again, on the diminution, the decrease in health. Now, whether or not in the long run that stands up, perhaps in the future people will say, well, that is too narrow, Frank. We have to broaden it. That's fine. But once you start with this objective basis for value and cost, then you can start building up an economic theory that is truly in humankind's interest.
Okay, maybe you can just very quickly run us again through how health is different from the measuring system we now have? Just very quickly in a few sentences.
Because as you indicated, the measuring system today is through money, okay? What economists call your revealed preference in the market, okay? How you cast your dollar votes. And as you indicate, many people don't have those dollars. And those that do, of course, then skew the outputs tremendously in their favor. You know, yachts and luxuries, imports, etc., that the rest of us really don't need or even want.
So instead of using dollars to vote, the new measuring system will be, is it producing a healthy...
Exactly. Is it producing health for both consumers and producers, workers? So, yeah.
So then where do we go from there to start actually... I mean, we all know how the system works now. You have corporations, you have resources, they make use of them, they do whatever they want, they control governments, and
right.
away we go.
Well, before we go on to that, that is one part of this theory. The second part, of course, is the environmental. Okay, so I actually have two mini frameworks within here. One is called the human framework, one is called the environmental framework. Because, of course, the mistake we have made in the past as a species is that we have, we've satisfied our needs and our wants without regard for the planet. So the second part of this is that environmental framework, which perhaps will modify our initial decisions. Okay, it may be good for us, even healthy for us, but if the planet can't sustain it, clearly we can't produce that. Okay, so these things have to be carefully balanced. So the aim of E&L, and again let me repeat that name, the Economics of Needs and Limits, or E&L, its aim is sustainable well-being. Not sustainability, but sustainable well-being. Okay. So again, it's a 220-page book. There's a lot to this. There's a lot of graphs. I've tried to make it as rigorous as possible on that foundation. I'm about to start the fourth edition. This is the third edition that we just held up.
Well, I'll just say something. I don't think, to people like me, you may not have to prove it with graphs. I mean, I kind of like the general concept.
Right.
I certainly don't like the economic system we have now. I can see it as leading us to environmental, social, and economic absolute disaster. And I shouldn't even say leading us anymore, because it seems like we're already there.
Exactly.
So we need something else. And I'm not averse to basing future decision makings on health, because we can see if it's working for the society and for individuals.
But still, again, if you and I are in charge of the Canadian economy or the BC economy, we still have to make very concrete decisions. We have to quantify things. We can't simply say no cars or many more cars. You know, to say approximately 5,000 more cars next year. We may adjust that. But we need some kind of quantification. Again, running a society, or at least, driving an economy is a huge responsibility, and it requires conceptual, intellectual backup. So we can't simply throw away economics, okay? And that's why I'm saying we have to replace the current economics with something else. But not simply throw it away, because again, that's what my professor, Steve Easton, criticized me for, justifiably. He said, Frank, you have a lot of what you call progressive ideas, but you have no theory to back it up. So again, let's not jettison theory entirely. Let's replace what is bad with something that hopefully is better. And that's my idea in this 20-year-long development of E&L.
Here we are. I mean, we all know where we are right now, where we are individually, where our society is, and kind of where the world is.
Right.
How do we start moving in a better direction?
Well, you're right. Currently, we have a society that, at least in the rich countries, is typically driven by the economic logic of capitalism, which, again, is destructive for people and planet. To implement this, we have to obviously organize politically. We have to get leaders involved. Again, I'm not an anarchist. I do believe that we need talented leaders to learn the theory and to help us form organizations to implement it. But basically what we have to do is, as progressive people who are disgusted with what capitalism is doing to us and the planet, we have to start asserting our rights as human beings, as thinking creatures, and say that no, your decisions through the market are unacceptable. We have a logic that we think is coherent and that leads to sustainable well-being. We do not accept your decisions. your implicit market-based decisions about the number and type of houses, the food, the imports and exports, the cars. We are going to make those decisions based on this logic, and then we are going to march in the streets and change the laws and change the practices and create new institutions to implement this logic. But the core is this logic, which we have to then assert, okay? And that assertion takes many forms. Like I said, it could be anything from marching to running for office, to changing laws in other ways.
But what is the logic that we are marching in the streets for? What is it telling us to do? You mentioned earlier the word contractionary,
right, which
is important.
Right. By the way, when I use the term logic, I'm referring to economic logic. Okay. Again, the factors that determine an economy's outcomes.
Okay.
And again, just to repeat so it's clear, by that I mean the outputs we produce, the quantities of those outputs, the wastes we emit into the environment, the resources we extract from the environment, the habitat destruction we cause through our economic activities, and the population level. So those 6 basic parameters. Okay?
Can you just run through them again?
Yeah.
Is that possible?
Okay, so again, I'm talking about economic outcomes, okay, which is what an economic logic produces. So again, they are, number 1, the outputs we produce. Number 2, the quantities of those outputs. Number 3, the wastes, the pollution, etc., that our economic activities create. Number 4, the resources, renewable and non-renewable, that we pull in from nature to run our economies. Okay. Number 5, habitat destruction. And number 6, often ignored, but a key economic item, population level. So those are what I call economic outcomes. Those outcomes are driven by an economic logic. The current logic, the capitalist logic, is, as I mentioned, the market-based interaction of profits on the one hand and manipulated wants on the other. Those things meet in the market, and we then implicitly, dynamically get those results. Right? Nobody determines those beforehand. They result from this interaction. So when I say that we must replace the economic logic of capitalism, I'm saying that we can no longer accept that market-based interaction producing those outcomes because, as you've stated many times now, that is what is destructive to people and planet.
Let me throw in 2 things. Computers and cars. Now, everybody's got a computer these days and everybody's got a car.
Right.
I would say that both of these things are very important in the destruction of our planet, but
right.
people like them.
Right.
So in the current system, they just go out and buy one if they've got the money. In the new system of economic needs and limits,
the economics, ENL, the economics of needs and limits.
The economics and needs of limits. I would hope we would have less.
That's correct.
And be happier as a result.
Well, it's a social process. You can't, turn off what we currently do and say tomorrow it'll be different. Clearly, it's a process. And to implement this, obviously, the legitimacy, the social acceptance of the current logic will have to fade. Any revolutionary movement, any fundamental social change is a process of, again, propaganda, marching, various methods. So I'm assuming that over time, ecologically destructive things will happen. Okay, ecological events will occur. Again, if we have a theory and leaders to propagate that theory, then we can start forming contractionary organizations and movements, and eventually contractionary revolutions to overthrow the current capitalist logic. But it's not a matter of course, turning on a light. It's a revolutionary process that may take 10, 20, 30 years, possibly more.
Unfortunately, we obviously don't have 10, 20, 30 years in terms of where we seem to be economically, socially, and certainly environmentally.
But we can start asserting this logic tomorrow.
Yes.
Okay, we can start doing that.
Okay.
And the other major thing here is uneven development, and the socialists face this as well, that some countries, some regions are ready, many are not. So Victoria, Vancouver Island, is generally quite progressive, and it's quite possible that in 20 years, Vancouver Island might secede from Canada and become an ecological society because it's ready. Toronto, probably not so much. A lot of people making a lot of big money there, probably won't happen there for a long time. So it's not a matter of the world or even a country moving in this direction. It's the pockets that are ready, okay, which set examples and which then can inspire others.
I wish I could agree on the Victoria being so progressive.
Relatively.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of progressive people here, and when I say progressive, I mean moving in a direction that I think is progressive.
Right.
So somebody else may have a completely different view. But when I look around Victoria, we've got a few great things. We've done some great things, but I want to start to assert this logic that you're talking about, and I want to start tomorrow. So where do we start? There's no groups, there's no organizations, there's no political party. It means contractionary.
Right.
So we have to accept the idea of less consumer products.
Definitely.
Is that a fundamental part of this?
Absolutely. In the rich countries. Obviously, in the poor countries of the world, the opposite may be true.
Yeah.
But
More local?
More local is part of it, absolutely. But the logic leads inevitably to more localism. Okay, localism in itself, I don't think, is the correct rallying call. But localism definitely will be the result of the logic. Well, the first thing, Jack, that we have to do is that, I'm alone in this currently. I need other people, and that's why I'm here really talking to you. I need other people to help me develop this theory. Okay, one guy waving a book is not going to change the world, even potentially. Okay, we need other people on the island, elsewhere in Canada and the world, progressive people, to realize that what I'm saying is accurate, that we need a new economic logic to replace, or theory to replace the current one. It starts with ideas. Everything starts with ideas in history, okay? The actions, the organizations, the leaders, the revolutions come later. Okay, Lenin needed Marx. Okay, Lenin could not have run the Russian Revolution without Marx 40, 50 years earlier, producing the theory. The theory has to be there. So at this stage, we need more theorists to help me develop and perfect this. This is one person's product. It can't possibly be adequate.
This is a good moment to mention the website.
Yes, my website is needsandlimits.org.
So needs, N-E-E-D-S, and limits, L-I-M-I-T-S,
.org, not .com. And this book is available there, by the way, as a free download. Okay, 5.4 megabytes. Download it, print it, or read it off the screen. It's there. My email address is there, and people are welcome to talk to me about it. But then to carry on, okay, once we have a solid theory in place that a critical mass of people accept as their guideline, then we can start, possibly running in elections, to the left, so to speak.
Or why don't you join a political party and try to influence, or go to a political party and try to influence them?
Yeah, I've rejected that. I used to vote NDP, Green Party. I've never really been a political party joiner. I'm more a thinker than a political actor. But I don't think that's going to be effective.
Let me just step back into the theory again.
Sure.
It's contractionary.
Right.
Okay, so we're going to see with this theory less consumer products.
Definitely.
It's egalitarian.
It leads that, exactly. It's egalitarian. What I strive for is equity, and not equality. Okay, there are differences among people and their contributions, etc. So strict equality, I think, is dogmatic and untenable. Okay, but equity, fairness, definitely.
So more fairness in the society than we have now. And right now, I think we have a very unfair society.
We do. But just think, if you change your criterion for economic health or economic progress to health. Let's say you use that as your criterion, okay? And then what you try to do is produce goods, okay, so that people are healthy. And it's impossible for somebody to be 100 times as healthy as another person. It's very easy for a person to be, in monetary terms, 100 times as wealthy as another person. So if we try to make everybody healthy, okay, we naturally head towards a relative level of equality. So there is a lot of equity built into the criteria I use, the core concepts I use. Okay.
Okay.
But yes, I do address this, by the way, as a separate issue in the book.
Can you give me any of the main points? Contractionary, equity.
Yeah, definitely contractionary. Okay, again, I'm talking about the contractionary revolution here as an alternative to capitalism and socialism. Okay, it strives for equity. And of course, and fundamentally, because again, the core issue I'm addressing is overshoot. Okay, I'm not sure I've emphasized that enough since we started talking, but the whole idea here, or the core of the idea, is that we as a species are in overshoot. Okay, we've overstepped the ecological bounds of the planet, and we need theory and practice, organization to step back from the brink of ecological disaster. Okay?
And there I think a lot of people would agree with you 100%.
I think so too. It's just a matter of what to do about it. You know, that is the real question. So in terms of this list of criteria here, or attributes, contractionary is the main thing, of course, that responds to this overshoot crisis, is that as a whole, the global economy has to contract and do so rapidly. So the catchphrase I use is rapid contraction.
Yes, but people shouldn't fear that a slowdown in the economy is going to lead to poorness or poverty for them. There's no reason it can't lead to a much happier and healthier and more content, community-based society that makes us all look back at the 2010 years and say, what the hell were we doing back then?
I fully agree with you. Absolutely, yes. But again, people today are manipulated very much, okay? Ideologically, consumer, you know the drill. So again, moving people over to understanding that may be a slow process. But certainly a sound economic theory, okay, which in a sense proves to them that this is true, goes a long way towards that. Without the theory, again, we're just waving our arms and saying, trust us, you'll be happier.
Is democracy a part of the theory?
No. We have to be very careful with democracy. Democracy, of course, is desirable, but it is a way of controlling decisions, economic and otherwise. And I have a real problem, for instance, Michael Moore ends his movie, Capitalism, a Love Story, by saying that we have to move beyond capitalism and that the alternative is democracy. Well, it's not. You know, capitalism is an economic system, democracy is not. And even if we had democracy, economic democracy, okay, so you and I, your friends, and everybody else cast votes as to what would be produced and consumed, even if that were true, would that economy be sustainable? Well, it may not be, okay, because again, we are beyond the brink. We are into overshoot. And what brought us into overshoot was, to some degree at least, our own human nature. We're biological creatures.
I would think that where we are now, if we had more democracy, and by democracy I mean people having the power,
to make economic decisions.
People having the power to decide where our society is going, including choosing an economic system, then I think the vast majority of us would say, yes, we cannot continue, and would demand, for example, everybody in town wants light rail. People want, and we probably want, a high-speed rail system across the country as well. But our society is so controlled, our media is so controlled, and our political processes are so controlled that we can't possibly move in those directions, as we've just seen with the Blue Bridge here in Victoria. I'm sure you see it in Vancouver as well. I think a lot of people, I think there is a democratic push to move in the directions you're talking about, but we just don't have any democracy and we're controlled.
The question then is what do we do about that? Okay, and I think that's of course a big question, but I think the key thing is always core ideas, and what stands in our way is the capitalist class. Okay, it's not simply a matter of there's bad people out there, but we are in a capitalist system, and there is a class opposition to democracy, to a more rational economy. So part of my strategy, not in this book, this is pure economics, but part of my strategy is to deal with what do we do about that, okay? And that's largely a matter of facing up to the fact that if we are going to seriously attack overshoot, we have to transform our economies. If we're going to do that, we need economic control. Let's not kid ourselves. If we are going to achieve economic control, we're going to need political power. The two go hand in hand. And if that's true, we need to start producing a revolution, a revolutionary strategy. I know a lot of people who are listening and watching disagree because it's a radical statement. But if we are serious about actually reversing the overshoot crisis, step by step, it leads to the fact that we need a revolution. And I know it sounds dated, but it's true. If ever there was a time in human history when a revolution was called for, it is this situation we're in now. This is not simply the working class taking over from the capitalists and running an expansionary economy. This is a matter of humankind saving the biosphere. This is the ultimate revolutionary issue. Okay? So I think we have to convince people that that is true, and then starting to look accurately and objectively at the class opposition. Okay? And then things like, one of your favorite topics is 9/11, and it's one of my favorite topics as well, because again, that is probably the capitalist class, scaring the bejesus out of us so it can do what it wants. And of course, the media plays along with that. Okay? So one of the things I would like people to do is to take things like 9/11 very seriously, okay, as a political issue, not so much as a technical issue, what actually happened, who placed the nanothermite where, but why did 9/11 happen? Who benefits? And why do so many good people, Noam Chomsky, Naomi Klein, and many others on the left, why have they automatically believed the official story? Okay. Because it's in that automatic belief, that hewing, cleaving to a particular worldview, that is killing us. We need independence, economically, ideologically, from capital. That really is what the Progressive Project, to me, is about today. For 500 years, we have been more or less under the thumb of a capitalist economic system, economic theories, ideology. It is now time for humankind to move beyond that. Okay? Capitalism has done what it's done. Some of it's been good, some of it's been terrible. But in a sense, we put it into place to increase production. That is now killing the planet. We now have to move beyond it. We now have to free ourselves in every way from that influence. Okay? So it's that ideological and mental and conceptual independence which really is the crux. And you emphasize the media again and again. You're quite right to do so. Okay, but let's not complain that they support capitalism. That's their role. Okay, it's our job, I think, to strategize, to get an economics in place, and to move beyond that media. We need our own media. We need our own elections. We need our own economic system and theory. Okay, we, you and I, and people like us, we're the future of the planet. We're the future of humankind, and we have to start taking that responsibility seriously. Right now, I think a lot of us are playing with that responsibility.
So it sounds like we need a political power, and that's why I always talk about media, because we need an independent media that's going to, because these ideas, especially of contraction and equity, they're out there.
They're out there.
The media never talks about them because the media represents powers that do not want change. They are the capitalist powers. They're doing very, 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 very well.
Right.
And they're quite willing, obviously, to destroy the entire planet in order to continue.
Yeah, remarkably, but true.
Yeah.
I've drawn the same conclusion. A lot of people shy away from that, saying that they've got to come around. They have children too.
Yeah.
But for some reason, I don't understand the psychology, but they are willing to destroy this.
It's possible then that even they, the leaders of our economy at the highest levels, are controlled by the system itself. Nobody can change it. It's a runaway locomotive.
It is.
That has got to be stopped. And, all we can do is appeal to everybody. It is a runaway locomotive. And the people at the top as well. We've all got to begin to change into exactly what, to my way of thinking, exactly what you're talking about. Contraction, equity.
Right.
I would add democracy, but we can.
No, that's part of it.
Yeah. Are there any other pillars, or does that basically cover it? Contraction, equity.
No, I think among the pillars, those are the key ones. There's of course a lot more in the book economically.
So, if you were the prime minister, then you have just won by a shocking upset the next election coming up on.
And I had a contractionary mandate?
Yeah, and
right.
you had a mandate.
Right. I'll answer that in a second, but at the end of my strategy document, which is on my website, needsandlimits.org, there's a strategy button, and it runs through my thinking step by step strategically. And at the end, I have a section, or near the end, called Economic Priorities, basically what I, or a contractionary organization, would do. And the first thing we would do is we would cut back on production, of things, especially that cause greenhouse gas emissions, A, and B, have very little positive or a negative impact on objective well-being. Okay? So, for instance, one of my, I think, platform items would be no new car production for at least 10 years. Research on cars, fine. No new cars on the planet if possible, but Canada, that's my mandate, no new cars for 10 years. We don't need any more right now. We won't produce them, okay?
So you mean, in other words, the car industry will be shut down tomorrow?
The car industry, that's right, in production. Not research, but production would be shut down tomorrow. Well, as soon as we can find alternative employment, okay, we have to be careful not to be ruthless. We're dealing with people here. We're trying to transform society. We need support, and we need to be humane. We've got to be very careful not to be ruthless about this. That's one of the great mistakes of the past.
So in other words, the auto industry wouldn't be shut down tomorrow. We would begin as fast as we could a transformation into putting people to work, building mass transit.
Right, but within weeks, literally,
yes.
We could reduce the work week, we could spread the load.
Right.
These things are very easy to do. They go, of course, against the grain of capitalist logic. They are politically impossible to do today. But with me in charge, in your scenario...
Having just won a democratic election.
Right, with a contractionary mandate, it would be very easy to do. Okay, if we discount all the resistance and counter-revolutionaries. If we discount all that, and I have the power, it would be very easy to do. Theoretically, employment is not a difficult problem. But practically, and in a capitalist context, it is very thorny indeed.
When you say theoretically employment is not a difficult problem, you mean we can, as a society, give everybody reasonably good and well-paying jobs if we want to.
Exactly.
I think we can too.
We all know this, right? That this is not rocket science. Of course we can do it, but not under current conditions. So the idea, we don't need new ideas there. We need to change those conditions.
Okay, so that takes care of transportation. We're working on transportation.
Well, greenhouse gases was my main thing. The other major thing is of course we're at peak oil. We're destroying or depleting very valuable resources.
What happens to the tar sands, Mr. Prime Minister?
Shut down tomorrow. Shut down tomorrow. Absolutely, no more tar sands. This is just absolute nonsense. Okay, so good point.
Now, there would be, let's say we do shut down the tar sands, we're talking about a massive upheaval. There are thousands of people working there. They have to be paid, fed, clothed, and then moved into...
Exactly.
Actually, some of them could be given the job of trying to repair the massive devastation to the environment that's taken place up there. I mean, you can't repair it.
Exactly. There's lots of work.
Yeah, right.
The problem always is profit-generating labor. I mean, that's the issue. There's lots of work for people to do if they work, 25, 30-hour week at most, okay? So again, this is not theoretically difficult, okay? It's just practically different under current circumstances. So again, outputs that use a lot of oil, gas, fossil fuels, other irreplaceable resources, that again would be severely curtailed. So production, like you say, this is a contractionary idea. We contract the economy, but we do it in such a way to mitigate greenhouse gases and to reduce the depletion of especially non-renewable resources. And I go on in my strategy, and I list about 10 things, what I would consider to be priorities.
So can you tell us where people can get the strategy on your website?
Yeah, again, the website is needsandlimits.org, and near the top you'll find a tab. It says strategy. Just click on it, and you'll find an 8-page PDF document, and it lists, again, step by step my strategic thinking. And near the end, you'll find about 10 points which outline my personal economic priorities. Hence, what I would implement if I could as Prime Minister.
You've written a book, which we've shown today, which addresses the replacement of capitalism's economic logic,
right,
Are you going to write a book about the Contractionary Revolution?
Yes, I am. After we finish, Jack, and then next week, in fact, I'm starting to produce the 4th edition of this book here, which will take a few months. But my major project after that, for the rest of 2011 and next year, is to produce a book with the working title, The Contractionary Revolution, and that will detail all the strategic thinking. It'll have a chapter which summarizes the economics, and that, I hope, my ambition for that book is to be the main guide for people who are interested in following this through, okay, and being contractionary revolutionaries. So yes, and I hope to have that done by the end of 2012.
Well, actually, it sounds like a very important book, and if there's a publisher out there watching this, are you interested in
I'd be very interested. New Catalyst or New Society Publishers on Gabriola, where I'm going next, is a possibility, but they typically don't print that kind of thing. So I'm not quite sure who would publish that.
But it just sounds like, because I agree with what you're saying, that where the direction we're going in is leading us to disaster.
Right.
We need change. The two main pillars of your idea, which is contraction and equity, I can certainly agree with. I think that's exactly what we have to do. And we need a blueprint of how to get from here to there. And if this book is going to be about that, and especially if it's readable,
yes,
then I think it'll be almost as popular as Harry Potter.
Well, we'll see, because it will be a revolutionary book. We have to transcend or supersede the current system. And for a lot of people that I read, the Richard Heinbergs, the Tim Jacksons, the Herman Dailies, that is unacceptable, as I found out in corresponding with these people.
Now, maybe you can just explain exactly what you mean. Are you saying that people who you consider to be progressive thinkers
Right, yes,
are not willing to go where you want to go?
Correct, yes. And again, for most of these people, I have corresponded with them by email. Not Richard Heinberg, I've tried, he won't respond. But people like Herman Daly and others, Tim Jackson in the UK, I try to contact these people and carry on debate with them.
Now, most of us probably don't know who these people are.
Tim Jackson is the author of this book, Prosperity Without Growth. And this is a major book, especially in the UK. Tim Jackson is the Sustainability Commissioner for the government there. And I've chatted at length with Dr. Jackson, and he categorically refuses to even consider moving beyond capitalism.
Well, you don't get to be the chairman if you're...
Precisely. Any ecological economist I've dealt with, and that's quite a lot, including Herman Daly, Joshua Farley, etc., the big names in ecological economics, none of those people are willing to entertain the possibility of moving beyond capitalism. Nobody. Richard Heinberg, who is a very articulate speaker and writer on peak oil and does a very good job there. But again, he avoids the term capitalism like the plague. For him, it's always industrial society, industrial system, euphemisms, evasions. When you talk to those people, his supporters, about capitalism itself, we don't want to go there. So there's a tremendous resistance among progressive people to even, again, considering, discussing, debating this issue, or even mentioning the word capitalism. Bill Rees, one of my favorite ecological economists at UBC, doesn't want to talk about it.
Now, a lot of people say that out there, as you try to move ahead with ideas, we meet gatekeepers.
Yes.
And gatekeepers means people who are put in powerful positions and who are absolutely never going to allow for any change to take place. They will, they just bar the door, and they're in powerful positions throughout our society. Is this what you think is happening, or just...
Well, the gatekeepers, of course, are everywhere, including on the left.
Yes.
That's why I mentioned Naomi Klein and Noam Chomsky, both of whom I admire in many ways. However, on certain issues, especially 9/11, which of course is a very dicey, difficult issue for many people, but they are left gatekeepers. On the right, in my experience, where I've had the most direct experience, is in the field of economics. If I were to try to get a PhD in economics at Simon Fraser University, I would be barred. That is simply not possible. I do not sing the right tune, I don't have the pro-market views, I would never get a PhD in economics. It's simply impossible. So the gatekeepers, especially in the field of economics, are very active and very powerful and very careful, very selective about who they let through. And this goes throughout society.
Now this is a very, very scary idea. I have a feeling you're right, but imagine what that means. If somebody with different ideas is not allowed to move ahead with those ideas, I mean, it's like 1,000 years ago.
Well, no, it's today, and let's not be naive. If you, I can play prime minister, but let's say that you are in charge of the current society, the capitalist society we have. Would you let Frank Rotering into your economics department? Would you let him get a PhD and flash that around? No, you'd want to bar me. I'd want to bar me.
Actually, I would never have even thought of that. Such a thing
then
is,
you're not a good
happening.
ruler. Then you don't wield power effectively.
Because I believe in democracy.
But that's not what power is about.
That's right.
Power is about control, not friendship, not popularity, and not democracy. And that's what we're talking about, power, the gatekeepers of power.
Frank, we're almost out of time. You mentioned 9/11 a couple of times, and
Yes.
you mentioned the idea of people like Naomi Klein and Noam Chomsky, who I also have a lot of respect for. They've done great things, but it's true that on this issue, I think they both refuse to go there. Is there a reason for that?
I've thought about this, and I think it's simply they have a fear of dealing with anything except the visible government, the visible capitalists. But there is a deeper power in the society, which some people, like Peter Dale Scott, call the deep state. People like Webster Tarpley, author of Synthetic Terror, calls the invisible government. But the fact that there are powerful people who are not visible to us, but who are pulling strings, not perhaps in a massive conspiratorial manner, but still very effectively, for some reason that is beyond the pale for them. Now, I don't know why.
Personally, I don't fault them for that. I think everybody is free to basically be where they are, as long as they're honest in their beliefs.
Right.
But yes, I also believe that there is a secret government out there, and that secret government has made sure that ideas like yours are not publicized. Like, for example, why aren't you on some of the talk shows that are all over television, radio? I mean, it's out there. CFAX Radio here in town, it talks a lot about economics. They have people from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation on. Sometimes it seems nonstop. I really don't like 90% of where those people are coming from, but I greatly like where you're coming from. But you're not on. I'm
Right.
sure you're not on CKNW.
Right.
Yeah, that's the big radio in Vancouver, even more corporate.
Well, that's the way it is. We have to push our way to the forefront, and but we have to also develop independent organizations and not depend on the mainstream media.
Any last words?
I need help. Basically, again, I've been swimming upstream for more than 20 years. I think I've done some reasonably good work, but I'm one person. I have a frail and feeble mind. I'm getting older. Basically, I need other minds, intelligent, progressive people to step forward and to help me develop this theory. Okay? So please help out if you can.
And I would add, not only developing the theory, but even moving ahead of your new book and starting to move us in the direction of a contractionary society. And the name of the book again, Needs and Limits, A New Economics for Sustainable Well-Being. To me, that sounds very, very nice. A New Economics for Sustainable Well-Being. You've been watching Face to Face. We've been talking with Frank Rotering. I think what we've heard is kind of revolutionary, and we have to start moving in that direction. Thank you very much, Frank.
Thank you, Jack.
And thank you for watching Face to Face.